In the northernmost region of England, there lies a small, unremarkable lake formerly known as Bolam Lake. It is part of a 160-acre park teeming with deer and red squirrels. But some claim that there's something else here as well, something far more dangerous. Since the 1990s, dozens of visitors to the area have reported seeing a tall, hairy creature with large fangs and glowing red eyes. Is it possible that the wilds of Northumberland are indeed haunted by the beast of Bolam Lake? Northumberland is located in the far north of England, just on the border with Scotland, and features an extensive, often treacherous coastline along the North Sea. With an area of almost 3,100 square miles and a population of just 320,000, it is the least densely populated county in England. The relaxed lifestyle, rustic charm, and relative seclusion give it a certain appeal for those seeking a break from the hustle and bustle of city living. Meanwhile, the abundant wildlife makes it a favorite amongst fishermen and hunters. However, many experts contend that these factors also make Northumberland a perfect hiding spot for things that might not want to be found. Looking at the description of the beast of Bolam Lake, it's impossible to deny similarities with large humanoid creatures found elsewhere in the world. The beast seems to have many characteristics in common with the Canadian Sasquatch, American Bigfoot, or Australian Yowie, some of the most well-known and heavily studied cryptids of all. These creatures are usually described as tall, covered in hair, and boasting features which seem to be a combination of ape and man. The thousands of eyewitness accounts across multiple continents have led many researchers to conclude that there's a race of unknown primates still inhabiting our woodlands, from North America to Australia and mountainous peaks such as those of the Himalayas. Some say they may be descendants of Gigantopithecus, a 12-foot-tall ape that supposedly went extinct some 300,000 years ago. Others claim these creatures are far more human and likely represent a surviving ancestor from our own evolutionary tree. England, of course, has extensive legends of dragons, ogres, and trolls. However, it also has tales of wild men. Perhaps the best example is the Woodwoes, a figure from medieval English folklore often depicted as a hairy, savage man living in forests. The Woodwoes appears frequently in art and heraldry across much of Europe, particularly from the medieval period. But Old English literature also has tales of other, far less evolved wild men. Unlike the Woodwoses, these creatures are described as more animal than human, hulking, brutish, and violent. Do these stories hint at an ancient race of primitive people left over from the earliest days of the British Isles? Or is it possible that what people are seeing is some previously unknown creature or missing link? Perhaps the truth is that the beast of Bolam Lake is something we simply can't explain with existing science. In 2002, 4 men from Manchester decided to head to Bolam Lake to go fishing for pike. Most of the day had been relatively uneventful, and the group spent much of their time there laughing, joking, and telling stories. As the sun began to set, a cool breeze rushed over the water. The men had a quick discussion as to whether they should head back to the car, but decided to sit out and enjoy the quiet evening a little longer. As the sun sank lower, it cast a dim light across areas of brush on the lake shore. It was at this point that the men noticed something unsettling in the tree line on the opposite bank. At first, it was just a flicker of movement, but then they saw it clearly, a figure, towering and motionless, watching them. Whilst it was unsettling, they were well aware of the fact that Bolam Lake is not entirely isolated. There are dozens of farms in the region and a handful of villages. They decided it was most likely just a farmer out for an evening walk. But as they fixed their eyes on the figure, they began to get a better estimation of its size. By comparing it with the surrounding trees and shrubs, they determined that it had to be nearly 8 feet tall. As they stood in disbelief, the setting sun fell behind the tree line. This caused the creature to become less visible, but it also revealed its most startling feature yet, its eyes. In the newfound darkness, the men could clearly see that the eyes were giving off a bright red glow, and they were completely fixated on the 4 men. The visage was so terrifying that, all at once, they began to hurriedly pack up their things, doing their best not to divert their gaze from the creature, which was still glaring menacingly at them. As they prepared to head toward the car and make their escape, the four friends became acutely aware that they would need to trek through the woods for several minutes in order to reach their vehicle, time that could give whatever they were looking at a chance to attack them. As if reading their minds, the creature suddenly began to move, stepping out of the shadows into some of the last rays of the dying light. The men could see it far more clearly now. It was heavily built, covered in thick hair, and sported two large fangs that glistened in the twilight. At this, the men bolted, leaving behind their gear and sprinting down the muddy banks toward their car. As they ran, they noted how the forest around them had become eerily silent, amplifying the sounds of their frantic footsteps. Upon reaching their vehicle, they piled in and drove directly home. Though they initially debated reporting the event at all, they soon decided to reach out to Ken Larson from the British Hominid Research Organization. Despite their attempt at discretion, the local media soon caught wind of the story, dubbing the beast the Tyne Yeti. As with most such sightings, people in the area were quick to dismiss it as a case of mistaken identity or of the four fishermen having a few too many pints whilst out on the lake. Little did anyone know that this was just the beginning of a rash of sightings that still haunt the lake to this day. The fisherman's story was quickly lumped in with other sightings of Bigfoot-like creatures. Many cryptozoologists found this frustrating, as it had one feature that made it stand out. Most cryptid sightings feature single individuals, not groups. Sasquatch is most commonly seen by motorists driving alone in the dark or by hunters who are camping miles from civilization. It's rare that 2 or 3, let alone 4, people report seeing the exact same thing. As any researcher will tell you, explaining away one person's story is quite easy, but it becomes much more difficult when you have group sightings like the one at Bolam Lake. And this seemed to be a trend that would continue, because most encounters with this particular beast feature more than one eyewitness. Nevertheless, the authorities never took any real initiative when it came to processing reports, let alone performing a coordinated search of the area. A year after the fishermen had their terrifying encounter, a woman named Heather decided to spend a peaceful day at the lake with her 14-year-old son, Daniel. They later described the day as quiet and calm, saying that the water was particularly still that afternoon. But as they strolled through the car park, Daniel suddenly pointed toward the trees, frantically telling his mother to look. As Heather followed her son's eyeline, she saw something off in the woods, a huge shadow moving in amongst the trees. She initially brushed it off, thinking it was just a trick of the light. But Daniel's voice only became more urgent. As she squinted, she was just barely able to make out a massive shape standing there, watching them. Instinctively, she pulled her son behind her in a protective gesture. As she did, she could feel that he was trembling. Unsure of what to do, she kept her eyes fixed on the shadow, which she could now tell was dark, solid, and enormous. Though she couldn't make out any features, she had a strong sense that whatever it was watching them. This made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end, and she had a fight and urge to scream. Finally, the shadow suddenly vanished back into the woods. In retellings, Heather remains adamant that she did not see the creature walk or run away, just that it faded into the trees behind it. To those following the sightings, Heather's story seemed to have a more supernatural tinge to it. At no point did she use the words ape or hairy beast when describing what she saw. Instead, she claims to have seen a huge black figure and an enormous shadow. As the weeks wore on, tales and reports persisted. People claimed to see bent branches and what they described as makeshift nests. Others claimed to hear bizarre screaming at night coming from the areas around the lake. At the height of the sensation, cryptozoologist Jonathan Marks and his team from the Center for Foreign Zoology traveled to Northumberland to investigate the sightings firsthand. For 5 days and nights, the team scoured the woods around Bolam Lake, interviewing eyewitnesses and setting up their equipment. But from the very start, things didn't go as planned. Their advanced technology, designed to track and capture any signs of the creature, malfunctioned inexplicably, as if the very environment around them resisted their efforts. On the second night, things went even further. As with the fisherman's sighting, it was twilight. And as this is typically the noisiest time in the woods, the team was unsettled to hear the forest fall into complete silence. No nesting birds, no insects coming out to feast. In this disconcerting quietness, the 18 team members soon realized that they could just barely make out the sound of something large moving through the undergrowth. They frantically used their flashlights to try and identify a source for the sound, but the brush proved too thick. That's when one of the members got the idea to hop into his car and point his headlights toward the trees. As he did, 5 of the 18 members, including Marks himself, watched in horror as a massive humanoid figure moved swiftly from one tree to another before disappearing. Impossibly, the creature then reappeared back in the original spot before bounding off again. The entire encounter lasted just a few seconds, so fast that 3 of the team members never even saw it. Marks would later report that the figure he saw stood at least 7 feet tall and had a barrel chest and muscular limbs. He and his team made no report of glowing red eyes, but they did photograph some strange footprints they found at the site, which they maintained were from a different creature than the one they saw. This implies that there were at least 2, and possibly a family, of creatures living in the Bolam Lake region. Although there have been several multi-person sightings since 2002, UK authorities have shown little interest in the creature or in identifying what it might be. Even Jonathan Marks remains uncertain about just what he and his team saw that night. He would later describe it as a quasi-human piece of nothingness, stating that it moved far too fast to be human and had angular features like a character from a mid-90s video game. This only exacerbates the question, what exactly is in the woods at Bolam Lake? The idea that there might be a missing link or other evolutionary throwback is not entirely far-fetched. While we generally think of the UK as being separated from the rest of the European continent by the English Channel, it has only been an island for around 8,000 years. Before that, it was directly connected to France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. This allowed early hominins like Homo antecessor to arrive in what would become the Isles around 800,000 years ago, back when massive apes like Gigantopithecus were still very much alive. Could a group of giant primates have crossed the same land bridge and taken up residence in the UK? It's certainly possible, but it would be difficult to explain how they've managed to sustain a breeding population, let alone stay hidden for so long. Skeptics of the Bolam Lake sighting state that the reports stem from either a case of mass hysteria or misidentification. If the latter is true, it will be challenging to determine what these people might be seeing. The largest animal native to the UK is the red deer, which can grow to around 500 pounds and stand about 4 feet at the shoulder. This doesn't account for sightings of 7 to 8 foot tall hairy biped. Neither do allegations that what people are seeing is an escaped zoo animal like an orangutan or gorilla. Not only were no apes reported to have escaped from nearby zoos during the time of the sightings, but even the largest silverback gorillas are only around 6 feet tall when standing on 2 legs. Of course, neither of these theories address the glowing red eyes. Though glowing eyes aren't reported in every sighting, there's a high frequency of this particular characteristic. As it stands, the only known animals to have red eyes are certain types of doves and pigeons, as well as certain insects, fish, and reptiles. However, some nocturnal animals, like cats, raccoons, and owls, may appear to have red eyes when light reflects off the blood vessels in their retinas. Still, they do not give off a glow anything like what the fisherman described. Taking all of this into account, we must consider the possibility that what is haunting Bolam Lake is not of this dimension, or perhaps not even of this earth. There are places all across the UK and Ireland that are strongly associated with spirits, fairies, and wraiths, not to mention the vast amounts of ley lines. Could the magic of these places be a portal into a different realm or dimension? This might explain why sightings tend to flip between ape-like wild men and formless shadows. Is it possible that the entity is able to shape-shift, but appears formless and black in between these transformations? Since the early 2000s, sightings of the beast of Bolam Lake have dwindled. However, whenever a film, podcast, or documentary mentions the phenomenon, the comments are always full of anonymous Northumbrians claiming that they too have had run-ins with the creature, which they simply prefer not to report. For now, The lake remains a popular area for fishing and hiking, boasting a visitor center and a charming cafe. Still, no amount of rebranding can make people completely forget what's happened at the lake during 2002 and 2003. Likewise, no amount of reassurance can allow us to dismiss the notion that there are things out there that we just don't yet understand.